Okay, it's about to go down. Down. With the Talk of Life Talk Show with Elma. Good evening, good afternoon, even good morning, because some of y'all might watch it in the morning. But anyway, this is a Christian Talk show. Thank you. I just wanted to know if they can remember it is a talk show. Okay? And it is a Christian talk show. Good. So that lets you know that we are Christians. And we don't mind if you're not a Christian, you can still come on the show.
Amen.
Because you might get saved, born again, filled with the Holy Ghost.
Come on.
But anyway, all right, we're going to have a good time tonight. I want to introduce everybody that's up here with me. I'm Elma. This is Pastor, husband, Glenn. This is
Cynthia.
and this is
Linda.
and our special guest tonight is Kelly. So we have Kelli Marie is going to be with us tonight. But our scripture is, well, I was going to let Kelly introduce her own daughter. Gosh, my goodness. I tell you, we have fun up here. But we're going to let Kelly introduce her daughter when we get all into Kelly's business. Okay. But we always started off with Philippians 1 and 6. Whatever God has started in you,
Amen.
you are going to finish.
That's
But
good.
that's not how it's quoted in the Bible, but I want you to read Philippians 1 and 6. But that's a taste of it. Okay. So tonight we're going to get off into Kelli Marie business. Deep down and dirty. Because Kelly has a testimony that everyone needs to hear. So tonight we're going to let Kelly tell her testimony. And Kelly, Kim sent me this little script that I had to try to get a magnifying glass. You know I wear contacts. And I'm trying to read all this stuff. But anyway, I was able to type some of it. Kelly, first of all, I was reading where you were from, Chicago, and like I was telling them, chick in the car won't go. That's how I learned how to spell Chicago. But anyway, so you moved to this great big state of Texas, which is larger than Chicago. That's Illinois and all of that. She had to come and get a taste of the big state, okay? So let's start out. Tell us, how did you end up here?
So I ended up here. I had a long distance relationship. And so I was in Chicago. He was here in Dallas. And so, when we got engaged, we didn't date very long. I think we started dating maybe like in September, and we were married in February. So, we got engaged. We got engaged in February, then we were married in November. So, maybe like a year span, though, I guess, if you look at it that way. But, that's actually what brought me to Texas.
The big state of Texas.
Yes.
Well, I can understand that. My husband and I married, we met on October 29th, and we married August 28th. He just couldn't leave this alone.
I'm trying to
girl.
tell you, listen.
Hey!
Wise man.
Was short distance. He was in, what was that little place you from? Hempstead, Waller area. And he followed me all the way up here. We met in college. Okay, so you ended up here from Chicago because of this long relationship. And you have so much to share because I know you have a ministry. And it says here that you are the founder of Dare to Worship with an education background in broadcast journalism. Wow. She has always has music as a part of her life. Wow. And Kelly has been able to have the opportunity to work with some of our great artists like Kirk Franklin, Fred Hammond, and others, okay? So let's get down and dirty. Come on, Kelly, tell us about Dare to Worship. Just tell us about you, period. Okay. It's your show tonight. Okay. Let's find out about Kelli Marie.
This makes me sound so good. I'm just
I know you want me to read it again.
I am not that deep. But yeah, I am the founder of Dare to Worship. Which really was just a call from God. Okay. That was the charge that God gave me during a rough period of my life. I had no idea that it was going to be something that was going to be ongoing and now a nonprofit organization. Right. That was just something that I heard from God for me, personally to do. Yes. But like you said, I wouldn't say that, well, I guess music has been a part of my life, but I've always been a worshiper. I've just seen myself as a worshiper. I always had a heart for God at a very young age, and I've had experiences, encounters with God at a young age.
Okay.
And so kind of getting down to what you were talking about
Get
here.
down, daddy.
So moved here,
Uh-huh.
got married, and hit some rough patches.
Right.
And
We all do, don't
eventually that kind of led up to a separation
Okay.
and a divorce.
Okay.
So during that time, I really didn't understand why I was going through some of the things I was going through. Sometimes we think, we live for God, and that makes us exempt from going
trials and
through
tribulations.
something.
Right.
So, okay. So,
That's
low-key,
Kimberly.
One thing right here.
so low key, I'm looking at God like, okay, this really should not be my story.
right now.
Like I waited until marriage to have sex. Can we say that? I
So
don't know if
you
we
was
can
a
say that.
virgin?
Yeah, when I got married.
Give it up, y'all. We don't hear too many virgins that actually wait to get married. Okay? That's a good
did.
thing. Yes, you can say that.
Yeah, I waited.
So how old were you?
When I got married, I was 22, 23. I was about to turn 23.
And you were still a virgin. Praise God. Y'all hear that?
possible.
Hold on to that stuff. Oh,
It's
okay.
possible. But you also have to know why you're doing it. For whatever
Yes,
reason, I
yes.
thought, because I was doing these things, that would make me exempt from kind of going through,
Right, right.
life. It didn't take away from God's love for me,
Yes,
but
yes.
that was just a part of the process. So anyway, I was divorce is hard anyway, but I was very
Yeah.
devastated. And I couldn't understand why I was so broken. And so just kind of going into just sharing a little bit of this part, because I think it's important for people to hear this as well. I was driving home one day, and it was raining outside, and so I was going through depression,
Okay.
And so I was driving into our subdivision, and coming into the subdivision, there's like a light pole there. And so I stopped in front of it, and a thought kind of came across, and I said, I could hit this light pole, but maybe I didn't want to kill myself, though. I'm like, if I just hit it just right and I hurt myself, he'll see that he loves me, and this is gonna bring him back. But that was a trick of the enemy. And I talked to so many different women, it's the same lies over and over again. But anyway, and so first of all, I couldn't believe that I was having that conversation with myself. I mean, I grew up in the church, and so I'm like, I couldn't believe that was something I was contemplating. And I drove off in tears. I didn't do anything. I drove off in tears. And I got home to in my garage, pulled down, hit the little garage button or whatever, and I'm still crying because I couldn't believe that I was hurting so bad that I couldn't believe that I was contemplating even doing something like that, and was laying on my steering wheel and started dozing off. Well, I didn't realize I didn't turn off the car.
Wow.
And so I started dozing off, and then my phone rang. I heard it, but I didn't hear it.
Okay.
Then I heard it again, and I kind of like woke up from this daze, and I answered the phone, and it was one of my girlfriends, and she said, "Girl, I don't know what's going on, but the Holy Spirit told me to call you now."
Amen.
And so I told her that I think she just saved my life, and I wasn't sharing. People knew something was going on with me, but I didn't want anybody in my business. I was on the praise team at the time, and I wasn't wearing my ring, and I was so scared to even lift my hands because I thought people would see I didn't have my ring on anymore. I didn't have, so it was just so much, and I kind of kept some things to myself. And
But wait, let me ask you something. If you didn't want them to know, why did you take the ring off?
Girl, that's a good question. I really don't know. And sometimes I did stuff out of just frustration and anger, I don't need him, or I don't need this and this. And you go through different phases.
Right.
You're angry sometimes, you're hurt, you're sad, you're
just talked
depressed.
about that.
It's a whole cycle of emotions that you
Yes.
feel. And so for me, it was almost a reminder, just like, it's over. Because I fought for my marriage for a long time. And then I also, that's a whole nother story, when I felt the release. But anyway, invited her over. And I kind of shared with her what was going on. And so that was one situation. The following, it might not have been the following week, it was a couple of weeks later. Another girlfriend, she invited me to church, to her church service. And I was isolating myself, so I really wasn't doing much. And so she's like, you got to get out the house, you know, you got to do this and that. And I'm like, okay. Well, that same week when I got home, all of his stuff was gone. All of my, I have a stepdaughter, all of her stuff was gone. So I came home to an empty house. And I literally laid on my living room floor and I was crying because at that point things became very real to me that it was over, and I felt very alone. And so I'm literally crying. I'm literally crying on my living room floor. And at that point, I was going to Gary Oliver's church. We were just talking about, and I called Pastor Tony. I had a very good relationship with my pastors. Called her, couldn't reach her, and found out later on that she was in Africa. But couldn't reach her, and that was the most alone that I've ever felt.
Okay. Let me ask a question, if you don't mind. When you say you came home and everything was gone, all his stuff was gone, did you take the furniture as well?
No, just like went in the closets. All his clothes were gone. All her clothes were gone. Like everything, just those possessions, just clothes and those items. So,
How long had y'all been married?
5 years.
You've been married 5 years.
You in 5 years.
So you
Yeah.
had the baby then, right? Did you have the baby?
Yes, but London was very young. She knows about this stuff now because she's heard me kind of share my story a little bit, but still she doesn't remember a lot. But she was born, and for the longest I called her my lifeline, and she didn't understand why.
Right.
But that's when
Right.
the times that I didn't want to get out of bed or certain things like that. This was my motivation to keep going because.
So did you know, I mean, was there some type of, I don't know, something that some type of sign where he was letting you know, hey, this marriage is over, and
Yeah.
okay, but you didn't believe. You didn't,
No, for the longest though, I just caught myself just kind of walking by faith. I have an amazing, many amazing examples of marriage in my family. My parents are still married. It'll be 38 or 39 years this year. My grandparents. And so, so I've had all these great examples. And then not only that, I was the one in my family in a sense where I always was involved in ministry. So from the outside, it looked like you just got everything together.
Going on,
and now I'm the one that's going through the divorce, and it's like, no, this is not supposed to be happening. My life is not supposed to be falling apart, and especially not in my, in my 20s. And I'm just like,
and you
what's
saved
going on?
yourself for this marriage.
Yeah,
And it's like,
yeah.
okay, Lord.
But
now.
there were signs. I mean, we had it was almost like a snowball effect. But I just thought it was just rough patches. We'll be able to, work through them.
Right.
But that wasn't, wasn't
was he
the
in
case.
the church with you at the time, or were you just going to church?
So he was, but he wasn't as active, and I think a lot of things he did for me.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't like speaking on that because I don't really know someone's heart.
Right,
However, you can kind of tell by people's fruit.
There you
And
go.
by
Yeah.
so if I go by that, and if they're being inconsistent in the sense that's where their heart is.
Right.
So
That's where did y'all meet?
um, yeah.
In Chicago or Texas?
we actually met in Louisiana.
Oh,
His best friend married my cousin. And so we met at the wedding or during that time where, preparing for the wedding. And it was so funny because, I really wasn't into short men. And I'm like, so I wasn't into him. I wasn't into him at first. And I'm like, he's like,
she's a short man.
I wasn't.
Song about that.
But I'm very family oriented, and he's very, charismatic, and he got in good with my family first, and that kind of what happened. So I'm like, all right, and you funny. My dad's funny, so it's just kind of one of those things. But so when this young lady invited me to church, now mind you, this incident happened on a Wednesday. She invited me to this service, which was a Friday. There's probably about 500 people there. And they had an altar call. I decided to go up there for the altar calls for somebody to pray. I just needed somebody to pray for me.
Right.
And when I came up there, the pastor was telling the band to kind of, lower the music some or whatever because the Holy Spirit was speaking. And so he said, at this time, everybody's kind of lined up at the altar anyway. So there's altar workers praying for multiple people.
Right.
So I'm down there praying with a young lady, but he's talking at the same time. And so he says, there's somebody here by the name of Kelly.
Wow.
Now, I thought I was tripping at first, so I didn't
Yes.
really I just kind of opened one eye, like, okay, maybe, I wasn't, really wasn't sure. And so then he said it again, and he's like, there's somebody here by the name of Kelly. And so I dropped the lady's hands, and she's like, everything okay? I said, well, I think he just said my name. I'm not really sure, but I think he said my name. So she calls him over, and she said, her name is Kelly. Now I'm going to pause right there just for a second. In Chicago, I went to a church where they float heavily in the prophetic. However, I also experienced it where it was abused, and they used it a lot to manipulate and control people.
Yes, yes.
So by that time, I was completely shut off from it. I said, Lord, if you ever got something to say to me, you just don't have to say it.
Yes.
Because I didn't have an ear to hear,
Right.
thus says the Lord. And not that I didn't believe in it, but I was just so turned off from it. So I believe that the Lord
I hear you.
said my name because that was the only thing that was going to get my attention.
Yes,
Because he could have just been right on, on point with certain things, and I still just would have been like not listening. But the fact that he said my name, that was enough for me to know that God knew exactly where I was in life,
Right.
what was going on with me, and I was so encouraged just by that alone. The man didn't have to say nothing else.
Right.
And so he came over to me. He said, "What took you so long to say that this was you?" Because he thought he was missing God. Like, all right, Lord, I know you told me, somebody named is Kelly here. And he told me, he said, he was flying in, and God gave me my name on that Wednesday, and told him that I was gonna be in that service and for him to lay hands on me.
Wow.
And like I said, Wednesday was the same day that I literally came home. I was laying on my living room floor, crying my little eyeballs out because I felt like I felt very alone, not knowing that God had a complete stranger interceding for me.
Right.
Wow.
Like,
Yes.
it blows my mind every time. Like, and I have to
Yes.
remind myself when I
Yes.
still go through things like, girl, no. God knows your name. He knows the beginning from the
Does he
end. Like you said, he's faithful to complete
Yes.
anything that he started within
That's
you.
right.
And so that night, he didn't give me a word. Like, so, you know how you're anticipating the word. I'm like,
Right.
okay, God's about to restore my
He gonna
marriage.
tell you something.
Oh, you already
He about to, God's
He
gonna
gonna
do
tell
it.
it tonight.
I knew he was gonna do it.
Do it,
And all he did was call your name.
But what he said was for me to be an open canvas and to allow God to do what he was doing in my life. And that he was going to raise me up as a pillar. And I'm like, okay, Lord, and so that night I went home, I was encouraged, because you're on fire like once you get your word. But I have to hold on to that because the enemy comes immediately
Right.
to try to
Right.
steal the
Right.
word.
Right.
So my mom told me, she's like, write it down, which I wish I would have written it down that night, but I
Yeah.
didn't. But I called her on the way home, and I'm like, Mom, this is what happened, and she's like, Amen, God is faithful. And I'm like, but I don't know what this means, but I know it's gonna be all right, And it didn't mean that the battle stopped there, because I still had bad days.
Right.
However, I was able to always go back to that,
Right.
and that moment always gave me peace to know that God is, even when I'm feeling alone, he's there.
Yes.
And so there were times I was crying in my bed, and I would ask, I'm like, Lord, I need to feel tangible peace. And there was this one time I literally felt the peace of God over me. But I had to do the work too. I created a confessions book. And I think you guys were talking earlier about just like anger and just other things like that. But all the emotions that I was feeling, I created a confessions book to speak the word over my life. Even if I really wasn't there, but faith comes by hearing, so I had to keep repeating it, and this is what God says about me, this is this and that. And so anyway, so I asked the Lord, I'm like, God, what is it that you want from me, in this season? And he's like, you got to go back to the basics. And I said, okay, well, what is that? And it was worship for me. Okay. And I think because I I started to find, when I was married, I started to find my identity in being a wife.
Okay.
I started to, you know, he became my security, you know, you're my source, and everything that God's supposed to be.
Right.
And so when that's
Yes.
gone, you completely lose yourself. And I'm like, why did I, you know, but that's because I was not whole when I got married. And a lot of times, you know, when people, they're looking for someone to fulfill them,
Right.
you know, and not
Yes.
necessarily
Right.
compliment them. And, you know, and I remember I was working at a bank, and a security guard, she just stopped me one time, and she sees me every day, and she just stops me one time, and she's like, what are you doing here? Like, working, like, like everybody else. And she said, I don't know, you know, she's like, but I see your name in lights. And I'm like, I didn't really want that for myself. God always tends to put me in the front, but that's not my comfort zone.
I hear you.
You know, and I'm like, okay. And in my mind, I always just wanted to build with my husband. I just wanted
Yes.
to, you know, I just
Yes.
wanted to do that. I didn't want, you know, it's almost like I didn't realize that there was still purpose in me prior to, you know, being married.
You were.
And so she told me, she's like, attend to your garden. And I'm like, attend to my garden. Okay. You know, I'm like, I feel like that's what I'm doing already. But okay, you know, and so that always stuck with me. Tend to my garden, tend to my garden. And so whatever God has given me charge over, that's what I was supposed to be, you know, working on. And so during that time where it was very, very hard for me and I didn't feel like worshiping God, I didn't feel like doing this and this, that was the challenge that God presented to me. And he dared me, which means a challenge to worship him. And so during that time, I was at Word of Truth by then, and we were in a high school. And I felt like our worship time was kind of rushed sometimes because, you know, we had to be out by a certain time.
Right,
so I'm like,
right.
Lord, I just want a space where I could just lay
Yes.
before you,
Yes.
you know, like just without an interrupted time.
Yes.
I knew that there's healing that takes place in the, you know, in the presence of God. And so I planned this worship night, you know, and I don't know what I was thinking. That, you know, like when I think back, like,
Yeah.
what possessed you to
To
do
do that.
You know, because
I hear you.
it did, you know, like I booked all these people. I've never done anything like this in my life, but I got a venue, I booked the people, I flew people in, I gave them, you know, the hotel. Didn't have a dime. I'm trying to figure out, like, Kelly, what was you thinking? How? And I remember someone asking me that too, like, how you gonna pay for all
Pay
this?
for it, huh?
And I'm like, I don't know. Like, God's gonna do it. But I had grace.
Yeah.
I'm wiser now. Like now, I don't have that same grace anymore because now I know better. So when I do things, I have the money up front. But I believed it was just an act of obedience, and
yes.
God was, you know, at that point he supplied.
provided for you.
You know, but now looking back, I'm like, yo, that's
That was
crazy.
crazy.
What were you thinking?
Crazy faith.
Out of
You
your
were
mind.
stepping out in faith.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
insane. But just wasn't wise. But it really wasn't thinking back. But and that's what I did. I just did it one time, and we had about 500 people show up the first time.
Wow,
And
that was good.
yeah, did it for the first right. I'm like, what in the world? So that's all I thought. You know, that's all it was gonna be was that. That was in 2013, and then 2016. So we went another 3 years. I wasn't thinking about it. You know, at that point, I'm over. You know what I mean? Like, the divorce is done and over with. I'm good, you know, in a sense. And I'm just going about my life, and God tells me to do it again. And I'm like, dude, okay, all right, cool. But now I know what it takes to do that. And I'm like, all right, okay, that's fine. Who do you want, you know, who do you want to be a part of this?
Right,
And the thing about it is, every Dare to Worship that I've done, I've always, I've seen it ahead of time, whether in a dream or a vision. And so the funny thing about that, so the second one we were gonna have Travis Green and Jonathan McReynolds. And the first time I think I reached out, I can't remember, I think it was just Travis. The first time I reached out to Travis's management, they declined it, and I'm like, all right, well, okay, you know, like, well, Lord, you told me to
do it.
do this, but we just gonna move on. We'll get somebody else, you know, whatever. And God told me to go back, and I'm like, you heard them just like I heard them tell me no. And he said give them this date. And I said, all right, but I felt like I was kind of getting the runaround at first. I'm like, maybe they don't know who I am. They probably just don't want to work with me, this and that. And he said, no, give him this date. Gave him that date. Long story short, that was the second Dare to Worship that we did. And that was with Travis and Jonathan McReynolds. And we had a couple of other local artists be a part. And each time, God keeps blowing our minds. So the second time, there was 1,000 people that showed up. And so, on stage, Travis literally just prophesies to me. He tells me, think bigger,
There you go.
and I'm like,
Yes.
this is big for me. Like, people don't understand. They
You done
see
went
the
from
product
500 to 1,000, huh?
and doing it on my own,
Oh, yeah.
and financially.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, God had given me people that literally ran with the vision, and I didn't really fully understand the vision, I didn't really get
And they
it.
going.
And they're like, whatever you need. To this day, they're like, whatever you need. And so my pastor, he came to that one, and so he called me a couple of days after, and he said, I think you're onto something. You probably need to get your ducks in a row, meaning because he's a businessman too.
Right.
So he's like, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, no, get your affairs in order. So if you want to set this up, he's like, you need to get your name. Because each time I was calling it Dare to Worship. And so, because that's what God challenged me to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I hadn't really shared with people why I was doing it. And God told me, you need to share why you're doing this. For one thing, it was going to set the expectation. People weren't just coming. I didn't want them to come for a concert. I wanted them to come with the expectation that God's going to do something.
Right.
And you're not leaving this place the same.
Right. There you go.
So,
There you go.
and that's what we started doing. And once I shared my testimony, I started getting all these messages from just different women. Now they were unsaved people. Because as a church, we know Travis, we know the gospel artists. The world, they don't care. They're not moved,
Right.
by that.
Right.
But once I started sharing how God healed me, and what I was going through, there's a lot of broken women that reached out as well. And they're like,
Yes.
I just want to come just to see. At that point, they're desperate. They just want
They
to,
just
whatever's
hungry
going
for it,
to, that's
yeah.
right. And that's what we encourage,
Yes,
come.
come.
Because at that point, that expectation's in the room already. And so I think the third one then at that point, God opened the door for us to go to Chicago and did the same event back here again. And so that was the fourth one. And so anyway, we had, I think, Todd Delaney and Todd Galbert and the Walls Group, a couple of other people. But literally, if you see the pictures, because after so long, afterwards, because it gets a little stressful, I have to remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
And then I look at these pictures and I see people on the altar and I see people crying out to God and I see, and I'm like, it just refuels me to know that this is way bigger than you. This ain't got nothing to do with you. I literally was just somebody that said yes, not even really knowing what I was saying yes to. But I remember crying in the shower one time, and because I was just going through so much with the divorce, and I told God, I said, if you bring me out of this, I promise you I'll tell of your glory, I'll tell of your goodness, not knowing that all of
He was
this
gonna hold
was
you
going
to
to, exactly,
Right.
going to transpire from it.
Right.
And then this last one we did in Houston in January, I never, like I told you before, I never liked being in the forefront. So even at these events, I was never going up there, and people didn't have no idea who I was, and I didn't care. I didn't want them to know, who I was. They were just going to this event. But they shared the testimony, and then I came up afterwards to also talk to the people, and I looked behind me, and I saw my name in lights, and I was like, okay,
But then somebody
Lord.
said that your
Right, I
name
was
was going
like-
to be in lights.
I was like, okay, Lord, that's funny. But God has been so faithful, and we're still growing. I turned it into a 501c3, so we're a nonprofit, because I wanted to find a way that I could use the arts and also give back.
Right.
So we utilize some of the artists that we work with, and we work with Boys and Girls Club too sometimes. So we'll bring them to Boys and Girls Club, and they could have like a writing session, or if they're interested in engineering, or if they're interested. So it's mainly for the arts right now, but I have other ideas that I want to do as well, but it's just one step at a time. But yeah, this turned into something that I thought was just going to be a one-time thing, and it's
And it's on. So basically
Yeah.
what you're doing, this is like a worship, praise and worship concert? It's
Yeah.
just music? Is it just music and testimonies? Or?
So it's crazy, because a guy it's you really have to experience it. The last one that we did, so we're using mainstream artists, right? And I'll just use the Walls Group as an example, because afterwards their parents managed them, and they came up to me and they apologized. They're like, Kelly, we're so sorry. The kids didn't do anything from the album. Well, that's because the whole time was like prophetic worship.
Yeah.
So like, and I told them, I said, no. They did exactly what they're supposed to do. Like, it's almost a setup in a sense, but now we've kind of got, at least the DFW, they know what to expect when the come. So they're not even coming in concert mode. They're coming for the experience and an encounter with God. And so they may not do a song from the album, and they may come with all intentions to sometimes, and then God does it. It's
Change
crazy
it.
to me, like how we even segue, because we may have like this high praise, and then somehow we're in this like serene like worship, prophetic worship. The last one I think was probably the most intimate, and that one, there was actually laying of hands. Pastor Sarah came, and you already know she's a firehouse. So they were praying for people, and so that's what I wanted. So it's slowly kind of transitioning into other things. But it's really just a night of worship that we do, and I just let God have his way. But I do also ask God, like, what is the theme? Like, what is it that you want to accomplish, for that night? So each one has been different in their own way. But so it's just been.
So how many total have you had so far?
We haven't gone past 2,100. I think we're like right at 2,000
People that attend.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking about how many total concerts have you?
Oh, had and all? No, I'm not at 9 yet.
She said
I want to say 6.
6. That's good.
That's awesome.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, I want to say 6, and so we're actually in the process of planning the next one now, and I've kind of then from there.
Is that the one with the where you're the blue one?
No, I'm just speaking somewhere there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's not mine. But so that's not going to be until 2020. So initially, I was just going to do them every other year, just because it takes so much. And then so now I'm able to get sponsors though, but at first I have to come up with the money myself, or God's gotta give it to me. But people get,
and you're telling God too.
Yeah,
God,
right.
don't forget about me.
All right now, Lord. I'm just like,
So what do you do? Is this your only job that you do, or do you have another job? Or?
no, I have a real job.
Okay. You gotta have something.
I have a 9 to 5.
Oh, okay. So you do.
that pretty much funds this.
Okay.
But and I was talking to, I have a boyfriend now, and I was talking to him, and I'm like, something's gonna have to give, because during that time it takes up so much of my
Yes, it
time.
does.
But I work
Yes.
from home, so it helps a little bit.
Right.
But so eventually, once we get there, I'm still. All this was new for me. I didn't have this plan for my life. I didn't want to have a business. Everybody wants to be a CEO and an entrepreneur. I didn't want that. Like, that wasn't,
Right,
that wasn't
but
the
it may
goal.
not be your
but,
plan.
you
But
know.
Well,
what
he
I
said
wanted
no
to
to
ask
plans,
you, did you see any of it when you were younger? See, sometimes God gives us a vision or something, and we don't know what we're looking at, or in a
So-
dream or whatever.
I personally didn't see it, but one of the pastors that I had, she told me that she saw me, well, this was for singing, but I really think it's for Dare to Worship now that things are happening. But she saw worshipers in a stadium.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
And
my God.
yeah, I know,
Yeah.
right? It's
Wow.
crazy. Yeah. So, and then someone else told me that they're like, hey, kind of think you guys should go to TV. And so I'm like, TV? Well, I was already kind of like thinking about doing something for YouTube. And I'm like, oh, let's do Dare to Worship TV. And so all I was doing is just taking people like myself that had a testimony, had them share their story and how God brought them through, or how worship transformed their lives. Because really all worship is, and that was another thing, I wanted to get people out of the mindset of worship just being a slow song. You know,
Yes,
like,
yes.
or worship a part of a service,
Right.
when it's, you know, really a lifestyle, but really just coming into alignment, you know, of knowing who God is. And so, and extreme obedience. And so, I wanted to kind of segue from that a little bit, to make it more of a lifestyle thing rather than just a concert. So because we kind of branded it a certain way, when people hear Dare to Worship, they automatically think about the concert, which is fine. But
That'll get 'em there.
which is fine.
That'll
Yeah.
get 'em,
So
okay.
then we're just introducing other things, you know, as well, to the brand itself. So I have to do my due diligence, because I'm like, Lord, you've been faithful. But he's also given me charge over this, and so sometimes when that means I got to educate myself, you know, when it comes to the business stuff, because that's what Pastor told me to, like, there's a natural and a spiritual side.
That's right.
Believe me, these people got to get paid, they got to do this, or I have certain write-offs, you know,
Yes.
got to file my taxes with
That's
stuff,
right.
and so, you know, for me,
That's
I
right,
had
it's
to
hard.
now get into that mindset when all I wanted was just the presence of the Lord. I'm like, well, I just want your presence.
Well, he gave you a big present. He gave you his present, then he gave you another
And
present.
now I'm like, okay, there's another part of it. But I had to learn that too, with the practical side and the spiritual side.
Right.
Because now some decisions that I make for Dare to Worship, and my team knows now when I'm kind of adamant about something, because that's if I know God has told me to do something.
Right.
It may not make sense, but like,
Right.
I know
That's
God has
right.
told me.
You know he told
And then
you.
there's some instances where they're like, okay, Kelly, you know, you gotta think about this, and they kind of bring me back, you know. But sometimes I mean, I just have to know when it's God or when it's, you know.
Without people getting in your ear too
That's
at the
right.
same time.
Yeah.
You know, I was reading too, and Kim little bitty thing that I had to write. And I know with ministry, you want it to be where somebody gets something out of it. And you mentioned about a man that walked in or something that was going through a
Oh,
divorce.
yeah.
I wrote
I'm
that.
like,
That was
I'm like, where did I put that at? I
That,
don't
you
even
you
know
had
where I
that
put
on that little bitty thing. That
I'm like,
Kim
I don't
said.
even remember
And you
shit.
said
I don't
he
even remember
walked
sharing
in
that.
or something.
Yeah.
And he wasn't supposed to be there or something
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
he saw the
Yeah.
cars.
Yeah.
So we were at, I want to say Northwood Church, and it's a pretty big church in Keller, and it was just crazy. So anyway, he was trying to see what all the commotion was about. He saw all the cars
Nosy.
in the parking lot, and so he just came in, and excuse me, they didn't like charge him or anything, and so he just came in, and so I just happened to see him, and I don't know, it was just. And so he told me, he asked what was going on, and I told him, what was going on, and I shared with him my story, and he's like, oh my, he told me something, he's like, I'm going through a divorce right
See?
now, and this
Isn't
and that.
that something?
It happens all the time. I'm like,
Yes.
even in Chicago, and this is why God wanted me, because at first when people invite me different places, a lot of times they want me to share, and I started becoming very familiar with the story because I kept saying it over and over.
Yeah.
And I got so convicted over it because I would like leave out certain parts. I wouldn't do that because I'm like, well, God, they probably already heard it, this and that. And no, it always even if it just touches one person, you never know who's out there.
Yeah.
It could just be one person. And that's what I tell the people that are apart as well, because they're, they may do this night after night.
Right.
Right.
But you never know who's in the audience, who's contemplating suicide, who's,
Right,
who's depressed.
Right,
They can have a smile on their face.
Right.
I'm a very jovial person. And so from the outside, you probably wouldn't even be able to tell if I was having a bad day or, certain things, or people always assume that I always had it all, together, and that wasn't the case. So when I did go through a divorce, it was like, oh, I go through life too, and so, but like I told God, I'm like, well, Lord, I'm just going to give you the glory. And I asked God to give me a way to share my story without man bashing or throwing him under the
Right,
bus
right.
or because I don't believe in that, because at the end of the day, this was about a story of restoration, of healing,
right.
and what God brought me through.
Right.
You know, the other, because it was when this first, I'm not gonna say it went viral, but I don't know, it got some attention. It was a reporter, and I think he had some type, it was a magazine, and they reached out and he said, "You never told us what happened. Like, did y'all get back together or did you not?" And I started laughing. I said, "You would be the one to realize that," because I never, if anything, I always just go into how just Dare to Worship being birthed. I never go back into, you know, the actual marriage of what happened.
Right.
And so, but he asked, so I'm like, no, like we didn't get back together, but that wasn't the end. That was actually the beginning of what God was doing, you know, in my life. And I always wanted to put emphasis on that, because there's always, that's not the end. Whatever people are going through, how you're feeling at that moment, it's not the end.
Right.
And so the enemy sometimes will try to make you feel like this is it. But, you know, it's not.
During your divorce, did you ever, did you blame yourself for the divorce, or, I mean, you know, I say get in and try to make
I didn't blame myself, but
Okay.
I think, but I took, okay, let me take that back. I didn't blame myself, but I do think it's important, this may be going off on something else, to be able to take responsibility for certain things. So I always feel like there should be growth from any situation.
That's right.
So even though I feel like as another grown person, you're responsible for the decisions that you made. It ain't got nothing to do with
There
me.
you go.
However, you know, if I was to do, because I will get married again, and I would ask myself, what would you do differently? Because you have to have growth.
Right.
And so there are things that I will do different,
Right.
you know,
I
do
agree.
differently. So whether that's, you know, affirming more if that's what you need to do, or, you know, whatever the case is. But
What about communication? Would
communication,
you do that more?
yeah, for sure. In that particular case, it was more so of an affirming thing. I have an
Okay.
amazing dad. Like, my dad, I've been completely blessed. And they used to call us the Huxtables growing up. Like, literally, that's how dope my family is. But I didn't realize that growing up. That was my
Yes.
norm.
Right,
So
right.
even coming into my marriage,
Right.
little things that he would do, well, that's like, it was below par for me sometimes, because I'm like,
Yeah.
you know,
My dad would
yes. And so, but then I realized, though, well, some things can come across as me not being grateful, or, you know,
Yeah.
you always telling me what's wrong, but you're not telling me what's
But how to
right.
fix it,
You
too.
know what I mean? And I didn't realize that I have as strong of a personality that I have. And then I have, my personality draws people
Right,
as
right.
well. And so that, I think that may have been, to the wrong person, intimidating if they don't know who they are.
That's right.
You know, or
That's
know
true.
how we're not competing, like we're,
Yes,
you know,
I hear you,
we're
yeah.
a team,
Right.
and we got to figure out what God is gonna do through that, you
Right.
know, because it's
Yeah.
not about, you know, me. And so anyway, just being more sensitive to that, you know, like you said, communicating, and so for me, picking my battles. I'm vocal, you know, so sometimes I just learn to
Shut it
Sound
down.
a little bit like me.
help me, Lord.
But you
I'm
made
still
it
a
sound
work.
real nice.
He's still yet working. No,
Said it real
but
quiet, you know.
I can't. But I know this about myself. You know, I'm vocal, and so sometimes I'm like, Lord, put a watch over my. But I used to be scared to say that, because I'm like, man, God will probably shut me up for real. You know, like I won't be able to talk.
Right.
And so
I need to
just
talk.
I need to be able to
So
talk.
what's the name of your program?
Dare to Worship.
And-
It's the number 2.
Okay, what does the dare means?
It's the challenge. Well, it initially started off as a challenge, but as I'm progressing in this, now my mindset is I have the audacity. Because if you look up the word dare, it could be a challenge, or it
Yeah.
could be like, oh, you dare to do this. It's
Right.
having the
Yeah.
audacity to do something.
Right.
So now I have the audacity to worship God in my storm. I have the
Right.
audacity
Yes.
to do, you know, so it just kind of
Yes.
depends. But
Right.
but God is, that's where I'm at now. Like at first it was I just didn't feel like worshiping you, Lord. And then I felt like, you know, worship has absolutely nothing to do with how you feel, and who it's about who God is.
Right.
And so it was the dare to just go beyond my feelings at first
And just worship
and
him.
just worship him for who he is.
Whether you
And now-
sick, whether you
That's right.
whatever, you gotta worship him regardless.
Regardless.
Okay.
And so now it's like I have the audacity, like that's how I feel.
It's like, I
did
dare
it.
you to worship.
So yeah, that's basically
Praising
what
your
came
way
from.
out, like.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like God had left you because you, when you got married, you was a virgin, and it like, okay, this is like a happy marriage, and everything's gonna go okay because I believe in God, and He, you know, protected me before I got married. So now I'm married, and all of a sudden everything like it's just falling apart. So did you ever turn your back? I mean, not turn.
Get upset with God.
Get
like,
upset, get upset with God because this happened and it wasn't supposed to happen because you said you was a Huxtable. You know?
It wasn't supposed to happen to me. But no, I think I didn't feel like God left me,
Okay.
but I didn't understand. It was just a matter of like I did not understand why I was here, and I always, you know, just would think about Job, you know, as well, and there was casualties, you know, in that. There was casualties, even though God told Satan that he couldn't take his life, but Job went through hell,
Yes,
and his
he did.
kids lost their lives.
Right.
How is that fair?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
How?
hear you. So
Them
you
little
went back to
innocent
the word.
You know, and I'm just like, but I had to, but I was
Yes.
taught that too.
Yes.
You know, and I'm fortunate in that to have a great foundation where when things will come up, the
Right.
word, that's why now it was important for me to have her in a word-based church, whether she kind of gets it or not, but I know that when I got older, scriptures would come up, even if I didn't, you know, but scriptures would come up. And so, because they could be hidden in your heart, but so it was important to me to have her, you know, in a word-based church.
Right,
So
right.
with that, I didn't know anything else but to just go to the word. I had to find my comfort in
Yes.
it, because that's the only way I was gonna stay sane.
Right.
And then when you said that because you were gotten involved in the marriage, you had lost your own sense of purpose
Self.
and who you were as an individual. And I thought that was really powerful for me tonight because I think that does happen a lot.
Yeah.
With women.
With
because it's all
moms.
about the man. If the man
Yeah.
can have a ministry all he wants. But as women, when the Lord gives us something, it's always like people are you sure the Lord gave it to you? And sometimes
Yeah.
it's that spouse too that is not supportive.
Right.
So at that point, he
Right.
wasn't even y'all weren't even together anymore. But see, the Lord just knows. He knows what he's doing.
He knew, because if I'm honest, I would not be doing anything remotely close to this had it not.
If you had
was still
stayed in the
married.
marriage.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because how my personality type is, I always put, I'm just a giver like that, where like, and I'm a nurturer by nature.
right.
So it's like, even if it's subconsciously, I'm gonna put your needs before mine. Like I'm just gonna, you know what I
Right,
mean? I don't mind playing the background. I actually enjoy, you know,
But what
being
if,
supportive.
what if God had told you to do something? Would you put him in the background if the husband
I
didn't?
don't even think I was bold enough to do it.
to
You
do
know,
what God told you to do at that time?
yeah. If
Okay.
God would have told me to do something like that, then
said no.
I don't think.
We were like, no, thank the Lord. He ain't
Yeah,
telling me to do that.
yeah. And like I said,
Yeah, it's
not to say that God forced me, but like I didn't even realize what I was getting myself into.
Right.
Like I really didn't, but that had to
That's how
be.
you know it's
Yes,
him.
I'm just
That's how you
like,
know it's him.
Yeah.
because now looking back, I'm like, girl, that is crazy.
But
That
you
is
know,
crazy.
we all do that, especially
Yeah.
when God gives us something to do.
Oh, yeah.
Because when we look back on our lives, I never would have thought I would be where we are, even in the ministry.
Right. Yeah.
Not growing up like that, I never would have thought I would have been preaching, because I was cussing more than I was preaching. You know,
I
so,
understand.
you know what I'm saying? So when he takes you through that, and like you said, when you look back, you be like, that was really crazy.
Yes.
But really, that was faith.
Yes, that
Because
was
you
God.
stepped out on faith,
Yeah.
and you was innocent, and you would do
Yeah.
it a lot quicker. Because like now, what they said, if I knew then what I know now,
now.
you never would have. You see what I'm saying? So
No.
God knows how to open
yeah.
up, and what's so good about him, like in Jeremiah 29:11, he said, what? He already know the plans that he has for
I
us.
got it on my face.
And everybody has a different plan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why I tell people a lot of time too, you don't have to take my plan.
Right.
God
Right.
already has a plan
That's
for you.
right.
So
Right.
when you get when you're secure in God, you don't worry about nobody taking
Right.
your
Yeah.
plan. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it's for you.
Right.
Your dare to worship is only for you.
That's right.
We
That's right.
can't take it because if we did, we'll mess it up
We'll
because it's
mess
not
it
fair. So your dare to worship. And then what's so funny, I like the way you got it, dare to worship. And a lot of people are scared to worship. And some don't worship him in spirit and truth.
yeah.
They just there. But when you really put yourself into the worship, you lose yourself.
Yeah, and that's what worship
Yeah,
really is.
it's
It's
just-
relinquishing your
yes.
control. And see, I'm a little bit of a,
But you
know,
look so shy.
I just do I?
I can't even picture her. Because you look
Ooh,
so
child.
shy.
Listen, and it's not fake. Like this is, but there is way more to me than just.
Okay, we're going to have to get some more.
That's when she transformed.
But I tell, like when I was going through like the little dating scene, like I was very transparent with people to tell them, because guys, they see you. I think they were attracted to my ambition.
Okay,
So guys
yeah.
would be like, oh, she's doing something, this and that. Oh,
yeah.
And I would tell, like, I'm not called to everybody. Like,
That's
I
right.
promise you think you like me.
But they're not. Okay, I'm with you on that
You
one.
think you like
Yes.
me. What you see on social media, that is,
That's
and it's not
different.
that it's not me, but that's an aspect of me. You haven't seen me when I'm down or when I'm upset or when you know what I mean? People automatically
But do
assume
you
I'm
actually get down? Do you actually get upset? Do you ever feel that? Oh, I want y'all to see. We go through those same things. Even though we have Christ, we still get to that point, right?
Yes.
But this is funny. Now, I'm just being funny right now. Okay, y'all, be honest. If you heard this name, Kelly Marie, would you thought she was black?
So I didn't want to say this, but listen, I didn't want to say
Marie
this.
part.
I didn't want to say this about my testimony, but because I didn't know if I could say it or not.
Yes, you
but
can.
when I went to the service, it was predominantly white people. So it was so funny to me. I'm like, Lord, all these white people in here, and ain't nobody named Kelly. Like, it was just me. Because when he said there's somebody by the name here, of Kelly, and I'm like,
Kelly Marie,
and so I'm like, all these white people ain't, because I always meet a Kelly, but they're normally white.
Yeah, that's what I said.
When he said it, it was that, like, later on we laughed at, like, my mom and I laughed about it, because I'm like, it was a ton of white people and nobody named Kelly there, but it was just me. So God knew it was
So
going to
when
be
he
that.
called you out, he said, I need you. There's this Kelly.
Kelly. This-
And you was up
You
there
were
getting
the
praise.
only
I was the only
Kelly.
Kelly there.
So it was just for her.
Whoa.
You know, but I'm just saying, when you
was
hear
the
that
only
name, Kelly Marie, the first damn thing, she's white.
Yeah.
You know.
So does the brokers I work with,
You didn't
because
say she-
I'm on the phone a lot, because I do underwriting. That's my job, and so mortgage underwriting. So I'm on the wholesale side, so I work with a lot of brokers. So a lot of times they assume that I'm white.
Right, that's what
And
you gonna
so
say that.
this one lady, she's like, oh, I could see you there, with your blonde hair and blue eyes.
See?
And I said, I got blonde hair, but
I'm not white.
I said, she gonna get a rude awakening when she. But it happens all the
know,
time.
that's what
I work remotely, so it's like a lot of times they don't know until
Right,
maybe they
right.
fly into town or something. I had all my interviews are normally like over the phone.
Right.
And so my manager, she came for the first time and flew into town. So, we all went into the office and she was like, they just let me walk right past. They didn't know who I was,
See?
And so later on, someone pulled me to the side. They was like, girl, they thought you was white. They didn't know that,
I tell you, that's really why I
So,
asked that.
It happens.
But sometimes
It
they
happens
get
all
you
the
in the
time.
door too.
Amen.
Then-
My parents were strategic, in that stuff. But yeah.
Well, do you ever see, I know you have the baby, but
Mm-hmm.
you and your ex, how are you all now?
Cordial. For her, we got a do what we
Yes.
have to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's good.
Right.
And
That's
she has her cell phone. I got a cell phone for her, so it kind of alleviates,
Him
us
calling
having
you,
to,
right,
you know what I mean. And so, my prayer is that because we kind of go through, seasons, and I'm like, it don't have to be, like it really doesn't have to be. But I think that's my test every time, because every time I think I've grown in the area,
Bam!
every time I'm like, God dog it, I'm still okay. I didn't know, like I thought, I was here, but that is one person that will let me know exactly where I
But you
still
need some
need
more
work.
word.
But that's okay. And now she's getting older, and she's like, Mommy, and she's like, why you and Daddy don't like each other? I'm like, oh, we do. I'm like, oh no, I don't want her to feel that way, so
Right,
we just gotta do what we gotta do and just being adults. And I'm like, at this point, it's been years. We really should be. This really
At a
doesn't have
better
to be.
place.
Yeah,
Right.
But I know she's so grown. But anyway.
Well, that's good. This is so good.
But he supports this, and he has seen, my testimony.
Yeah.
And the first time I did it, he called and congratulated, me on what was going on and the doors that God was opening for me. And
That's good.
yeah, so
Has he got married again?
Yeah.
Oh, he did? Oh, okay. Well, that's good then. Well, I know our time is running out. I tell you, this hour go by so
They do.
fast. But what would you say to someone right now that would encourage them? Maybe if they are going through a divorce or they've been through it and they still have holding on, what would you give them? What would you say to the
what we've been saying all day, dare to worship. That's what you need to do. Let it go. Let it at the feet of Jesus. And I heard this one time, someone told me that, God is so good where when we lay our burdens down, we're still not walking away empty-handed. Like, it's an exchange, And so if we're giving God our burdens, we're giving him depression, we should be picking up joy. We should be picking up, because it's an exchange between us.
Right.
And that's really what it is. Like, a lot, you can't. Pastor Sarah told me this one time when I was in my feelings, and she said, feelings are fickle, and you can't trust them.
That's right.
And sometimes I feel sad or I feel this and that, and I can't let that control me. Right. And so, the word is powerful. It's not just pages on the book, words on a page. They really have life. And get into the word. Do what you got to do. Surround yourself with the word. And that's really all.
And dare to worship.
And dare to worship.
All right,
Make
we
it a lifestyle.
thank you, Kelli Marie. We
I
love
appreciate
you.
you
We
guys
love
for
it.
having
We
me.
love it. And sometimes God will take us through things, and we might not understand why He's taking us through those things.
Yeah.
It's to help us to grow. It's to help us to have a testimony that can help. And it's not all the time that you did anything wrong or something. Sometimes He just allows us to go through something because He knows we can handle it.
Right.
We may not know it at that time,
Right.
but everybody has their own story.
Yeah.
They have their own testimony. They walk in their own shoes. And sometimes we try to fit in those shoes, but those shoes are not fit for us.
Right.
So we have to learn to wear our own shoes,
That's
be
right.
our own person, and live what God has put into us. Tell your testimony. Our pastor preached on yesterday. We need to go to church. Tell your testimony.
Yeah.
Tell it, because somebody needs to hear your testimony. So tonight, Dare to Worship. You can also find Dare to Worship website, www.daretoworship.com. She's also on Facebook,
Amen.
Dare to Worship. That's DARE, the number 2, and worship. Maybe I need to spell that too. WORSHIP. She's on Twitter. She's on YouTube and Instagram at Dare to Worship. So you can't miss Dare to Worship. So we have truly been blessed to have Kelli Marie on our show. May
you for
God
having
continue to
me.
bless you and your baby. Do you want to say anything? She don't want to say anything, but we're happy to have her on the show with her mother.
My baby.
And you love your mother, baby. Cherish your mother, okay?
Amen.
Be obedient to your mother. It's always good to have a mother, okay?
That's right.
And
Be
a
obedient.
daddy.
What we say? Be obedient to. Man, that's a word. Thank you, Jesus. Be obedient to your mother.
And listen, okay? She's so pretty. But anyway, that is our About to Go Down is about to close out for tonight. So anyway, stay tuned for the Talk of Life Talk Show with Elma. Next week, we're going to bring you with another good show. May God bless you and keep you. Until I see you next week, love you. Hi, I have a few announcements I would love to introduce you to. The first one is, have you ever gone to the hospital and they was getting ready to take your blood and you got stuck so many times? I would like to introduce you to A+ School of Phlebotomy, the art of the draw, where the CEO is Alicia White, 817-948-0373. Again, that number is 817-948-0373. Your yard will look so good, you'll forget my name. Whatchamacallit Landscape. Owner and CEO, Derek Brackens, 682-400-9255. If you want your lawn to look beautiful, check him out. Again, 682-400-9255. Rent your next event with the Kirk Booth Photo Booth. Check us out at www.thekirkbooth.com, where the CEO is Emmanuel Kirkwood, 214-210-8562. And we do all events, so check us out at www.thekirkbooth.com.